I agree. I don't think it's an either or. I don't think you either need Hogard or Fears. I just think that the reason you have kind of a combination of two teams, right? You have the new guys and the old guys. And the old guys are good and skilled and talented, but they top out at some point. The young guys have a higher ceiling, but are far below now. This is most all teams in the country and why it's hard to play freshmen. But I do think, and when I counsel other coaches, we all kind of in the same mindset that when you lack shooting, even if the point guard you bring in isn't the world's greatest shooter, the fact is that the more guards you have, the more guys you have that can create shots, the better the overall shooting is going to be. So I think, Fears is a guy who Izzo would know better what he's not ready at, probably scoring wise, shooting wise, and probably defensively he frustrates him, but he absolutely can create shots. And I would trial by fire, play him more minutes and trying to develop even Hogard with him. So you have two shot creators. I think the bigger issue for them is, and they had a bad call go against them late in the game when it was 4, but the big guys can be an issue, especially Manny Sissoko, who can block.
Yeah, they're not good enough.
But that's honestly, Jeff, I'm going to say something which I think most people will agree with. When you go around the country, most teams' biggest weakness is the 5. Even Kansas, with that being their strength, can be their weakness because he can't guard. So you either have, a Zach Edey, a Hunter Dickinson, or you have, or you go small. But if you go with anybody else who's a big guy, who's in college, he's in college for a reason because he's not an NBA caliber big. So I don't think that problem is unique to Michigan State. Matter of fact, it's a problem that most programs have. There's just not very many players 6'8" and above who can really play that are in college basketball. They're that big. They're probably playing in a different league. But I do think for Michigan State, trying to find the right mixture is going to be the key.
Yeah, here's the one thing I'll say. Talking to Tom Izzo after the game, he is not overly concerned about their poor shooting over the first 3 games. It was better. Second half, they made some. What he pointed to, Malik Hall played well, finally. He had been awful the first 2 games, hesitant, reluctant to shoot the ball. He made a couple. Hogard was accountable after the game, coming in and saying, hey, this one's on me, guys. But again, he said, listen, we've shot the hell out of it all offseason. I'm not worried. Those are going to fall. It's been, 2.5, 3 games for the most part. We haven't shot the ball well. The law of average is just going to catch up here. Duke, Doug.
Yes.
Now, they weren't great the first game against Arizona. I thought they got punked a little bit at home, which is rare for this Duke team. Filipowski, I know you love. He's looked great the first 2 games. Probably has a little bit too much on his shoulders right now, coming back from double hip surgery, but moving really well. For a kid who had double hip surgery in the offseason, you would never know it. And ultimately, he feels like that's going to make him better in a month or so, where he had some limitations last year that I can't believe he did because he played out of his mind last year. The biggest thing for me is clearly Tyrese Proctor. That's my biggest concern. He's averaging about 10 points a game, but even that is a little bit misleading, Doug, because he has not forced the issue at all. At any point in the 2 games I saw him in person, have I seen Tyrese Proctor say, you know what? Give me the damn ball. I'm going to drive the lane and embrace contact, Doug. Embrace contact. None of it right now. He looks soft, unfortunately, and I love Proctor. I want to see him play with a little bit of you-know-what to him.
Yeah, he's got to get to the rim. He likes to get to that mid-range. That's his game. He's got to get to the rim. I think, though, that and we'll talk about this with Kansas, okay? And when you don't have guys that are just a blur like Kentucky does that can get to the rim to break the defense down, I do think that when you have a Caleb Foster who took a gigantic step, especially in the second half, back-breaking shot after back-breaking shot. And eventually, I think Jared McCain's going to catch up as well. And my guess is, again, just an educated guess, you can play all 3 together, but you probably play one of the 2 freshmen, whoever's got it going more, along with the bevy of returners they have. I think Ryan Young has accepted his role, and he's great at it. Great. And then they can downshift and put Flip at the 5, and now they're much more athletic and can score at all 5 spots. They can be big. They can bring in Mitchell as well and give them some length. What I like about Duke is the versatility. We didn't mention Jeremy Roach, but you do know what you're going to get, right? Mitchell has that length and athleticism that really helps you. And then, we'll see. McCain is going to be on this list of top scorers as well. You have a really good 7 or 8 guys, and I found in watching the other night and in watching Duke previously, the difference in, I think, a younger coach as opposed to Coach K, and this is not going to be sacrilege, right? He's an incredible coach, is you have a guy who's willing, and younger coaches, to change matchups. Let's go small for 5 minutes. Let's go big. Let's do what it takes to win this game. And I thought, you have a guy over there who's processing at a very high rate, and it's a little bit more of a kind of NBA style. It's harder with college kids because as much as you want to count on somebody, he's a shooter, always be a shooter, their roles aren't as defined. But what I like about Duke is, I'm with you, you're not getting as good a point guard play, and Ryan Young's a big body, but it's not like he's what they had last year, Derek Lively protecting the rim. But you have a versatility of size and skill. You have a lot of scoring out there, and you have just enough age and depth, I think, to make it work.
Yeah, I think they're going to miss Lively against some matchups here.
Of course.
He was such a great rim protector, didn't need to score to impact the game, took pressure off Filipowski. Now Filipowski's got to really guard defensively and step it up, because if he doesn't, what do they have interior? They have Mark Mitchell, who plays bigger than he is defensively, but he doesn't give you a whole lot offensively. So, listen, this team, like you said, they've certainly got enough when you look at them to say, you know what, they can get to a Final Four. Michigan State, when you look at them, you say, they're going to need a lot of help to be able to get to the Final Four. I just, they're not.
Listen, I really think this. He's using Cohen Carr as just put him in the corner and have him, shoot to the rim anytime he can. But the genius to Izzo is he's been down this road before. And I agree with you. There's some parts that I don't necessarily love. It can be a little clunky. But they do have, we even talked about Ivy. They have guys that can score. They have some depth. They have some age. They have Izzo. He's going to figure it out. And he's just got to figure out who to play when, with whom, and how. And that's really it. And I would also credit him with, he didn't get as bogged down in his sets as he has, in previous years. I still think he's trying to figure out what he has. And I understand that if you're not in the world of college basketball, you're like, dude, they've been practicing all summer. They practice all fall, granted on limited basis, and then you're practicing for a month, you're playing exhibition games. Why don't they know? Because it's all different when the lights are on, the popcorn's popping, and the other team is adjusting, and the other team is adjusting, and they have equal or sometimes better talent. So I still think they got Butler coming up, right? And then they play outdoors in Palm Springs.
They play a bye game after Butler, then they go to Arizona. They go play Arizona in Palm Springs.
Right. So they're going to look different every game as he's trying to figure it out. It's a big thing.
All right, let's move forward to a team that I don't know how much we expected from the Kentucky Wildcats because of their youth against a veteran Kansas team. They came out, and like you said, they struggled early, but then Rob Dillingham got him going quickly. As quick as Dillingham is, that's how quick Kentucky flipped it and controlled the game for most of the second half until Kansas fought back, ended up winning the game. I was more impressed. Can I say that, Doug? I was more impressed with Kentucky than I was with Kansas because, again, my expectations of this young group. Oh, by the way, Justin Edwards was terrible. DJ Wagner was terrible. Antonio Reeves made a couple big threes, but he was 3 for 17 from long range. And yet, Kentucky had a chance to win this game. How impressed were you with this young Wildcats team?
I was really impressed, and I'll tell you the most impressive part. What are they lacking right now? What are they lacking?
What are they lacking?
Yeah.
Size.
They had 13 offensive rebounds against Kansas, despite the lack of size. And that's just want to. That's just toughness. And rebounding is different now, right? Because you're playing, and they're playing a much more spread out style. You know, Cal had been accused, rightfully so, of let's just run floppy and let guys play. They've evolved some. I mean, look, everything they do is into a downhill drive, but it's based upon his personnel. It is much more open. I mean, hell, you said it. Reed shot 17 threes. 17. 17. That's crazy.
And he made three. He made three, Doug.
It felt like he made more, but yes. But again, they had 13 offensive boards. They got far more field goal attempts than Kansas did. I mean, like, look, they had 17 more field goal attempts than Kansas. And Kansas, you know, most of it was with them was with twos, with body blows, right? Getting to the layups, getting to Hunter Dickinson, getting to the free throw line as well. And they had to play a little bit old school as they got 36 free throws. I was impressed with Kentucky because and Cal does a better job than we give him credit of handling the egos, reading the game. I did think, and I know Dillingham had foul trouble, but I thought he put him on ice after he had a kind of a run going of making 4 straight shots. He took him out shortly thereafter.
Baffling.
I mean,
baffling.
I think it was foul trouble, but that's the old Dean Smith, you know, like only guy to hold Jordan under 20 was Dean Smith. Like, keep it simple, stupid. That guy's scoring, leave that guy in. Because Dillingham can give you 40. I mean, he has that capability. Or he can pull a DJ Wagner and go 1 for it. So I like their toughness. I like the style by which they played. There was no pout. And, you know, the only thing I'll tell you, though, is that's a matchup where they have a great speed and quickness advantage at many of the perimeter spots. And if you know about the SEC is the most athletic league. And so I don't know how it looks in league play. But I was pleasantly impressed. I wasn't surprised because Cal figures it out. He's no dope. Okay? And he's got some good dudes. And I knew some of the young guys were going to be the bed. But look.
Hey, how impressed, when you talk about being impressed, I'm going to flip it over to Kansas now. You were similar in a lot of ways to DeJuan Harris when you played college basketball, right?
Yeah, but I didn't have I never did what he did the other night, which is.
Why? So, yeah, go ahead. Why was he able to do that the other night?
He's not a particularly good shooter, but if you make him shoot, he will beat you. Like, he just does whatever it takes to win the game. He also, there's probably about 2 or 3 plays that he got deflections when they were outnumbered defensively. He does a lot of little things that are really help you win. Now, he had some terrible turnovers. He did miss a couple of drives. He's not perfect. But the reason I think Kansas ultimately wins the Big 12, they don't have the best players. They don't have enough depth. Without Arterio Morris, they're probably a player short. But whatever the guy on the sideline has done to teach the guys on the court ways in which they can win the game, that game was the perfect embodiment. They couldn't rebound. They didn't make shots, right? They didn't have any depth. Anytime he went to the bench, Timberlake wasn't ready. Furphy wasn't ready as well. And yet, down 14, they found a way to win the game. That's Kansas basketball. I do think when you get in the NCAA tournament, that's where they'll get beat a little bit earlier than their seed will tell you because their talent isn't as good as you would think Kansas should be. But that did not surprise me in one bit because the guy at the point is such a stud and such a winner.
Yeah, he's a stud and he plays kind of steady. And then you add in Hunter Dickinson, who gives him that emotion. And, you know, right when Bill Self came out of the locker room after the game, he said to me, "How about Hunter?" Like, he hasn't had a dude like Hunter in a while. And what makes Hunter great offensively is he can do what that team needs him to do, which is step out a little bit, at least be a threat from the perimeter. But he was fighting 3 dudes every time, on the glass. He was fighting them. Those dudes were athletic. They were coming. Like you said, they didn't have a lot of size, but they were tough. They were athletic. And that was one hell of a game. And that's a game that I think, again, you hope to get a little bit earlier in the season. All right, the fans were out in full force at the Champions Classic as well. We'll give them the spotlight next on Goodman versus Gottlieb. All right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb here Thursday afternoon. And at the Champions Classic in Chicago, we sent our cameras around the United Center asking fans for their questions and comments about college basketball. We got some good ones lined up, Doug. First, Mike has an interesting question for you.
I'd like to ask Doug how much he think he would be worth if he was playing today with NIL.
It's a great question. You know, it's one that honestly, like every one of us ask ourselves, right? It's like, man, how much would I be making? A good amount. A good amount. My guess would be, because remember I transferred, I don't know, the Notre Dame coming in, I think I would have done well initially at Notre Dame. But at Oklahoma State, I think it would have worked out well for me. Probably six figures, you know, in the mid six figures. And I was not afraid to do appearances, not afraid to show up, and not afraid to ask.
You weren't afraid to do appearances?
No, you still did appearances back then. You just didn't get paid for it. You did it out of charity.
I'm kidding. I know you enjoyed doing appearances.
I do. Listen, I have great connections with my school. I feel very much tied to it and the boosters. And it's really helped my entire life. Helps me from the time I got out. Like, I always thought that was traditional NIL, right?
Go ahead.
I just always thought, I've been anti-NIL because I knew it would lead to pay for play, right? But for example, my senior year, before the season started, I was a bartender at Willie's Saloon in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I would pour the stiffest drinks in Stillwater. Now, the tips were probably a little bit better than they should have been, but I had to report it and do all that stuff. And had I been able to do my own night and make more money and do a door charge, it would have been great. I would say, how much would I be worth? I think I'd be worth low six figures. Six figures.
Grade yourself 1 to 10 as a bartender. How good were you?
Ooh. I would say like a 8.5. Here's what I was good at. Okay, I didn't really have a liquor license. Okay, what happened was the summer before, I stayed there for a summer semester, and it became like our hangout. And there was Willie's is famous because that's where Garth Brooks first started playing. And it's not a country bar; it's just a bar, but they have live music. Well, Wednesdays was karaoke night, so we started with Wednesday night became our spot. Then it became Thursday, Wednesday, and then Thursday. And so I said, well, I'm here. Why don't I just work and do the bar and do the door? And then from the door, one night they didn't have a bartender. Dude, don't tell anybody you don't have a liquor license. Go down and get a liquor license. It's not that hard. Costs like $80. And I just told people I had it. So I was good. It's not that hard in a college town, right? I want a cold beer, or I want, vodka something, whatever. Or rum and Coke. And the stiffer you pour, the more the tip's going to be. That's pretty much simple. So I was probably 8.5. I could not make a gimlet. This is before the days of a Moscow Mule, but there were lots of drinks that I didn't know how to make that I would steer somebody into you want that? Well, you know what you really want? You really want a vodka soda, because that one I can make.
All right, let's get this thing back on the rails. All right, next, Jonathan has a question about the tournament.
So, Doug, question for you. What are your thoughts on the potential expansion of the NCAA tournament to 96 teams and beyond? Personally, I really like 68 and think it should stay that way, but it seems to be a pretty controversial topic. Some coaches really want to see more, so would love to hear your thoughts.
Obviously I don't love it. The 64-team field was perfect. But as I think both know, one of the huge issues in college basketball is you have the haves and the have-nots. And the haves are super popular, super important, and they're going to drive this thing. And so the question is, for those low D1 schools, how do they keep their automatic bids in the tournament? Because the big boys are coming for them, right? This is a real discussion. One of the reasons that I think Mark Few wants Gonzaga out of that league is not that he doesn't like the WCC, but he fears them losing their automatic bid. Right? That's a real discussion. And, you want to be, those big leagues are going to get all the bids. And at some point it's going, the problem with the NCAA is that it's more like the Senate than it is the House, right? In the Senate, every state has 2. In the House, it's based upon your population, right? That's what we need, I think, and what we want in college basketball is, yes, those smaller schools, smaller conferences, Cinderellas are important, but let's not undersell the fact that the big boys drive the bus. That's why people go. And so I'm at my core against it. I understand that the reason its popularity is really the bracket, not the games. And the bracket is perfect at 64. But I'm also a realist, and more games is more money. And if it gives us a chance to make sure that the little guy still has a seat at the table, I actually would kind of have that discussion. I'm willing to have that discussion. What do you think?
My thought on this is, how about on Tuesday and Wednesday, we play playing games all day? And it's mids against highs. That's what I would do. Some form of that. You can do however many. because you get people interested then. I'm not really all that interested on Tuesday night on seeing two 16s play and then having two high major teams that had every opportunity to get in play each other. And they were fringe teams. So
I think that could be great, right? Like you expanded the first four to be four different sites, each night on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, right? Where they play a playing game to get in the NCAA tournament. I would before that. But again, what you're offering up, and this is really important, is high major versus lower mid major. So I'm with you. I don't what the big boys want is they want those 15 and 16 seeds to go away. But it's weird because they also don't
make the tournament. And those make the tournament what it is. That's the problem. You can't make them go away because that makes the first 4 days what it is. And I understand you may not want those teams going too deep. But, all right, some fans didn't ask questions, Doug. You know what they did? They just gave us a prediction. They gave us a prediction. That's what Dave did. Dave.
In the finals, Kentucky's going to play Duke, and it's going to be another shot heard around the world by Mitchell or Reed, Shepherd, and we're going to win at least by 10.
Hey, Doug, you got that same hat, don't you?
That big hat? Nothing says Big Blue Nation more than that big hat. The skin was definitely, he was smiling, and it was dark. There was some lubrication there. And then the mention of Reed Shepherd, because that, and who played well. But there's no doubt Big Blue Nation wants him to take the game-winning shot. We're going to win by 10 against Duke. Okay. That's a prediction.
Just try to get to the Final Four. If Cal can get back to the Final Four with this Kentucky team, he's done a hell of a job because it is young, talented. But the other thing is, again, we talked about it earlier, how impressed we were. But what I'll say to you, Doug, is Justin Edwards did not look good. DJ Wagner did not look good. Antonio Reeves he had the ultimate green light, and again, made a few, but he didn't look very good. They were in it with all those three guys, but at some point, you might look at it like, well, if they don't start to come along, you start to worry about, like Justin Edwards. I love Doug. I love him, but here's the problem with Justin Edwards. He's playing with freshman guards that really aren't going to get him the ball where he needs it. They're not going to make his life any easier this year, right?
It's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. I do think that Reed Shepherd is going to earn some more minutes, not because he's as talented as DJ Wagner or any of the other guards, but because he made some shots, but he's also a ball mover. They just need guys sometimes to just move the ball. Dillingham is not. He's going to try and go get buckets. And DJ is going to try and go downhill and just beat you with speed, toughness, and athleticism. So they need some movers. And Reeves is trying to, because he's the vet, he's trying to be the alpha. So I see that. I also think there's another team that their rotations are going to look different, not just if they get the bigs healthy, but as they try and figure out what they have. That's just the reality. Trey Mitchell transfers in there. They didn't know they had him until, midsummer? So there's still, or late summer, they're still feeling out who they are. I don't think it's a national championship team. It's a bold prediction, and one in which is the most cliche style of predicting it in all of basketball. Big Blue Nation, big hat, lubed up, post-game, really excited.
I got to get one of those. I got to get one of those hats. All right, next, the last question. Julian has a recruiting question.
The only question I would ask, I guess, is as a high school basketball coach, what exactly are coaches looking for when they're looking for prospects? So each coach I know says different things as far as what they're looking for when they're recruiting a player. But I know there's got to be something that everybody's looking for. So what is that one thing that you can tell a high school prospect, okay, this is what they're actually looking for, just so everyone's clear and on the same page?
Doug?
What is it? Look, first you have to have the talent. But remember that when you commit a scholarship to a guy, and now you're committing NIL to a guy, It's a lot more about the other stuff. You know, are you a good teammate? Are you going to show up on time? Do I have to chase you to class? You know, all these other kind of little things. And I will tell you, there's a lot of talented players, but if you lead with, hey, what's the NIL? It turns a lot of coaches off. It just does. So they want guys that are about one thing, winning. Because the more you win, everybody makes more money. It's really that simple. So, and how do you win? You win with culture guys that have to be talented. I think in terms of skill, I think shooting and basketball IQ is making a dramatic comeback. I think the overall speed, athleticism, guys that can jump to the moon, it's really hard not to bite that apple. But I know several coaches who said, hey guys, we got to rethink how we look at who we're recruiting, because all these sets, all the stuff, it doesn't matter if the ball doesn't go in. And all the coaching and thinking, if the player can't think, it doesn't matter if he can't take what you're saying and put it into play. So I do think that basketball IQ and skill has taken a step above that of raw athleticism. And then the last thing is toughness. Like, if you're not tough, you can't really play in college basketball. You just get pushed around. That's a big thing.
I'll say this too, Doug. It's obviously changed with high school kids over the last couple of years, where all these coaches are looking for transfers right now, especially with the extra year, COVID year. Do you think that flips back at any point soon, where it starts to tilt back to the high school player instead of the transfer? Or do you think it's just going to be, hey, we need older dudes? That's really what has won championships and enabled teams to go deep lately.
Well, I think everybody says the transfer portal. It's not really the transfer portal. It's the ability to play right away out of the portal. So, I mean, the first step in kind of leveling it back off is that they've denied many of these second transfer waivers. That's still good. There's still going to be the second transfers, because if you're a grad student and you graduate on time, you can transfer and play right away. There's no cause for a waiver. You still have the COVID year guys. I think when the COVID year guys, you still have 2 more seasons. And when the COVID year guys go away, I think that younger players will come back in. But they have to incentivize colleges to taking high school freshmen, right? Because, like, what's the incentive? I have to beat somebody in recruiting, which means I probably have to give a kid NIL that he's not really going to earn his first year. And then if I don't play him, and the parents or the agent or the handler is not on the same page, I mean, I could redshirt him, or I could play him very little. Like, these are bad words. It's hard to keep depth when a kid gets mad, or a kid doesn't want to see through the process and thinks you're going to take a transfer, and he's gone after his freshman year. So I think that what the lay person doesn't understand is the ability to transfer and not sit out hurts high school kids in recruiting. It really, really does. It does detrimental harm that is not recoverable. And so I think that is the only thing that will completely flip it back, is if you have to go back to some form of sitting. If that doesn't change, high school recruiting outside of the top 75 or 100 will be minimized in comparison to years in the past.
All right, coming up next, first impressions are everything. We take a long look at some of the best conferences in the land on the other side of the break. All right, welcome back. Gottlieb. I think I'm 1-0 on the year. But who's counting, right? Who's counting? I don't know who's deciding. We're going to have somebody, maybe our producer, Dennis, is going to kind of tally them up after each show and see who wins the show.
Fair enough.
All right, let's get on to each league. We're going to start actually with the Big 12 today. And which team has impressed you the most out of the Big 12? I'm going to go first here because you don't leave me enough time in a lot of these. So I'm going to start with BYU because I had no expectation. 500 last year in the WCC. A lot of people, Doug, were concerned whether Mark Pope had kind of lost the juice of this program, and now they come in to the Big 12 and you're expecting them to get their butts kicked, and they may, but they got a huge win over San Diego State at home. And the Hall kid made some shots. They got Jackson Robinson, who's played well. He's kind of been well-traveled a little bit throughout the course of his career. But I'm hoping BYU can be competitive in the Big 12. And by beating San Diego State, you feel pretty good about the fact that they're not going to be that team that everybody's just kind of circling and saying, hey, you know what? We know even if we play our C game, we could still beat BYU.
No question. They're a team. I'm interested to see Cincinnati. You know, they have Edrin Jameson, Jizzle James, a freshman guard, and they got Johnny Newman is like a fifth-year transfer he started his career where his dad played at Clemson. I really like Seamus Lokoisius, who transferred in from Butler. He hasn't played as well or as much as I thought he'd play, but overall the league looks like it's still going to be the best league in the country with Baylor, Houston, Kansas. Kansas State, obviously, we'll see if their roster remains you don't have your best player. They took one on the chin against USC. And I'm interested to see Oklahoma State tonight. They take on St. Bonaventure and then possibly Auburn tomorrow if they win. And I know that people are sitting there going like, wait, they lost to Abilene Christian. They did, but they didn't have Javon Small, who's their best player and their starting point guard. Also didn't have Jamyron Keller, who's his backup, so no point guard. And they shot the ball terribly. When Small played in the second game, they made 17 threes, looked like a completely different team. So I don't know if Oklahoma State's great, but they're last year they were right on the border. They finished in 7th when West Virginia, who was in 8th, made the NCAA tournament. I think Oklahoma State's right going to be there on the border. Oklahoma had Jaden McDowell from Siena. I mean, he's really good. And so the bottom of that league is tough. And that's where, it's like if you just took the top 3 teams or 4 in the Big East, you're like, man, that's as good a league as there is in the country. I'd agree with you. Completely agree with you. But what makes the Big 12 so tough, and, used to have 10 teams and, 9 of them are NCAA tournament worthy. Like, I think Tech's going to be really good. They feel like they're back. We haven't mentioned Iowa State. TJ does a tremendous job. He's got a good group. And then they have the big boys as well. So you have 2 or 3 that can compete for a national championship, and then you got 7, 8, or 9 that have a chance to get in the NCAA tournament. And then, we'll see what West Virginia looks like. We'll see what Central Florida looks like. West Virginia's hard because they don't have their full roster yet. And obviously, firing Huggins at that point in time in the year makes it really difficult to know what the team's going to look like when they play in big games.
All right, coming up next, it's a big slate of games as the holiday tournaments get going. We're making our picks on the other side of the break. Goodman versus Gottlieb Thursday afternoon, and a lot of new guys in new places this year, Douglas. Hard to kind of remember where everybody is, where they've been. We're going to hit on a few key transfers here. And I'm going to start with a guy out west that kind of followed his brother's path a little bit, right? Andrew Nemhard went to Florida, wasn't as successful, transfers to Gonzaga, has an unbelievable career, and is now in the NBA and playing in the NBA. His younger brother, Ryan, probably had a more successful start to his college career. Almost took Creighton to a Final Four, one step away a year ago. They're similar players, but different. He follows his brother to Gonzaga now. He's got more, I think, on his plate because I don't think this Gonzaga team's nearly as good. He's small. Can he handle this? Can he handle the pressure that's going to come with taking Gonzaga, winning a WCC title, and maybe taking them deep in the NCAA tournament, because that's what everybody expects now from the Zags?
I think he's terrific. I do. I think I don't think he's, his brother's made it in the NBA. I being a little bit smaller, a little bit more of a pure point guard, I don't think he's an NBA player. Doesn't mean he won't make an NBA roster. But I think he's tremendous for Gonzaga. He's exactly what they need. To me, though, this team, you got Graham Ike, who we'll get a chance to see him against Purdue. Yeah. A guy who, 2 years ago had an awesome season when he was playing with Wyoming and they made the NCAA tournament. You combine him with Anton Watson, they're still nasty up front. Still nasty up front. Anton Watson's those are good players. Again, not NBA players, but really, really good college players. The difference for Gonzaga and the Final Four year, is there's no dude, right? There's no dude. And I still think they'll be very good. They'll win 25 games, but this will be more of in the line of the traditional, really good Gonzaga teams, win 25, 28 games, compete with St. Mary's for the WCC, but they just lack that, hey, that guy's going to win us a game. And as good as I think he is, and I think Dusty Stromer is going to be alongside, I think this is a big week for him out in Hawaii. He's a main court guy. There's a top end there that they know they don't have.
So the guy who replaced Nemhard at Creighton, Stephen Ashworth, who came from Utah State, small, can really, really, really shoot the ball. So I think Creighton gained something there. Ashworth didn't score at all in their win against Iowa earlier in the week. He again, defensively is what I worry about with not just Ashworth, but this entire Creighton team. They've got other guys who can make plays off the bounce and for others in Baylor Shireman, in Trey Alexander. So they don't necessarily need a point guard, but man, the goose egg against Iowa, that surprised me.
It did, but look, I helped Stephen a little bit in his recruitment, and it was interesting. I think everybody thought he was going to BYU, and his thing was I wanted to play against better competition. It was just he felt, but then when it was okay, so BYU is going into the Big 12, I think there was a little bit of hesitance because they didn't initially recruit him, going back to when he's out of high school or off his mission. Remember, he's married and he's 25 years old. He's an elite shooter and an elite kid. Yep. All of your hesitance is right, but that should be the best offensive team in the country. Right?
With or without?
Without a doubt.
Right.
Without a doubt. They're unbelievable.
The biggest name other than Hunter Dickinson, I think, that switched jerseys this offseason was Max Abmas. He went from Oral Roberts to Texas, had an incredible career at Oral Roberts, not just individually, but what he was able to do, taking that program to the tournament a couple times, to Sweet 16 when he was younger. And he goes to Texas, where, again, a lot of people kind of worry about that jump. He's small. He can score. We know that. They haven't really played anybody yet, Doug. What type of year do you think Max Abmas has in a Texas uniform and the impact he's going to have on this program?
You combine him with Hunter in that backcourt, and those are two kids that are not 6 feet tall, but they can both go get it. They're like a finished product, maybe a little bit, about the same, maybe a little bit smaller than the. That's what the Kentucky guards would look like if they last a second or third year. I think they're going to be good, And it's interesting. I saw, last game they're bringing Brock Cunningham off the bench. He's such a versatile weapon for them. Dylan Mitchell's back. The question for Dylan Mitchell is, it seems like he started to figure it out at the end of last year. Hey, if I'm just an energy guy and I'm not trying to prove to people I can do things. Okay, but now he comes back for a second year. Is he going to try and prove to people he's a pro? But I like Max A. Smith, and because he's not really a point, and Hunter is, and Hunter tried to score. But the two of them, I know you went on.
Hunter can guard too. Hunter can really get after it defensively, which helps.
Absolutely. The only thing holding Hunter back previously was, high turnovers his first year, and then 3-point shooting percentage, and he's dramatically improved. Those are two grown-ups. They've seen a lot. They've done a lot. We didn't mention Texas, but that's just because we ran out of time. They're a dynamic team that could win the Big 12.
All right, we're going to end the show with some buzzer beaters, Doug. We're going to pick some games because we got some good. I'm going to start with a game that I cannot believe is a first-round game in a MT, a multi-team event, and that is Monday in Maui, which is the most loaded field I think I've ever seen maybe in Maui history, which is saying something. Purdue plays Gonzaga in the first round, Doug. Who are you going with? I mean, do the Zags have a chance in this one?
They definitely have a chance. See, look, Gonzaga's thing is, right, they're not gonna wow you defensively. You need Noah Hickman to play well. I mean, this guy, there's a lot of time invested in him. I think it's a competitive game. I do think Purdue wins, but it's a matchup of two really talented point guards who we got to see how they've improved in terms of toughness. And then Ike versus Zach Edey. Obviously, Edey has a massive size advantage, but Ike is, he's as impressive a physical specimen as you're going to see.
The problem I have is Gonzaga's lack of depth up front and overall now without Steele Bennett. So that's the problem is once Zach Edey gets Ike in foul trouble, good luck Ben Gregg. They just don't have enough. All right, on the other side of that.
But hold on. Before you dismiss Ben Gregg, how does Ben Gregg play offensively?
Yeah, he steps out, and that forces Zach Edey to do something he's not as comfortable. Absolutely. But
I think this is a game played in the 80s. You'll love it. I think Gonzaga is going to be a lot closer to Purdue than you think.
Good. All right. On the other side of the bracket, UCLA plays Marquette first-round game Monday in Maui. Hell of a matchup, obviously. Tyler Kolek gutted it through a win in Champaign with an ankle that's a little bit discolored right now. He's going to have to play maybe 3 straight games in Maui, starting with UCLA. No easy one. I think Marquette takes UCLA and takes them handily. How about that, Douglas? Handily in that game. I would agree.
I do not think this is I don't think UCLA, if you ask Mick, honestly, they're not ready for this trip. He's got essentially a new team outside of a Bona, and they've been playing a low level of opponent so far, and they've been just okay. UCLA will be fine by the end of the year, but I think this is a really tough draw.
All right, we're probably not going to get to too many more.
Okay.
Dennis has UConn, Indiana on here in the first round of the Empire Classic. I don't even think we're going to waste time with that one. I'm going to flip it forward to the next day, Monday, and the consolation game between Indiana and Louisville. Who wins that one?
Indiana. Big. Easy. Big, easy. Xavier Johnson's. Yeah, I think they'll compete with UConn. Remember, UConn hasn't lost a non-conference game in 2 years. Right?
Yeah, UConn. Listen, I think UConn, Indiana could be semi-interesting only because Indiana has a lot of talent. We're not debating the talent in Bloomington this year. We're debating the fit, the style, the play, whether there are enough shooters, whether you can play 3, 4, 5s at the same time. It might be closer than I'm going to give it credit for at UConn. But I will say this, UConn at the Garden is a tough place to play and to beat.
No question.
All right, We'll see you next week. Goodman, Gottlieb, I think I'm 2-0, Douglas. Have a good weekend.